We got kicked from the foster home. Can we sleep here, sir? The black billionaire took them in. The wind cut through their thin jackets like ice-cold knives as 10-year-old Maya clutched her younger brother's hand tighter. Even though they were twins, she had always been the protector, the one who made sure Kai ate first, the one who stood between him and trouble. Tonight was no different, except tonight felt like the end of everything. Maya, I'm so cold, Kai whispered, his teeth chattering so violently that the words came out in broken syllables. His lips were turning blue, and she could see his breath forming small clouds in the freezing December air. I know, baby. Just a little longer. She lied, because she had no idea where they were going or what they would do. All she knew was that Mrs. Henderson had thrown their few belongings onto the porch and locked the door behind them. You cost me too much money! Mrs. Henderson had screamed through the closed door. Always asking for food, always needing things. The state gives me enough for one child, not two hungry mouths. But Maya knew better. She had seen the checks that came in the mail, 2 separate payments, one for her and one for Kai. Mrs. Henderson had been stealing from them for months, feeding them scraps while keeping the money meant for their care. When Maya had finally worked up the courage to ask for seconds at dinner last week, Mrs. Henderson's face had turned red with rage. Ungrateful brats, she had muttered. Acting like I owe you something. Now they wandered through the wealthy neighborhood where Mrs. Henderson's house sat, their feet numb in shoes that were too small and full of holes. Maya's stomach cramped from hunger. They hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, just a piece of stale bread and some water. Look! Kai pointed with a shaking finger. That house has lights. Maya looked up and gasped. Before them stood the most magnificent house she had ever seen. It wasn't just big, it was enormous, like something from a fairy tale. Warm golden lights spilled from every window, and she could almost imagine the heat radiating from inside. The garden was perfectly manicured even in winter, with elegant lamp posts lining the curved driveway. We can't go there, Maya said automatically. Rich people don't want kids like us. But Kai was already stumbling toward the house, drawn by the promise of warmth. His small body swayed with each step, and Maya realized with growing panic that he might collapse soon. She had read about hypothermia in school, how your body just shuts down when it gets too cold. Kai, wait! She ran after him, but part of her was relieved. Maybe, just maybe, whoever lived in that beautiful house might have a warm porch where they could sleep. Maybe they wouldn't call the police right away. The front door was massive, made of dark wood with intricate carvings. Maya's hand shook as she lifted it to knock, but before she could, Kai had already pressed the doorbell. The sound echoed inside like music. They waited, huddled together, as footsteps approached. Maya's heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst. What if the person inside was mean? What if they called Mrs. Henderson? What if... The door opened, and Maya found herself looking up at the tallest man she had ever seen. He was black, probably in his 30s, with kind eyes and an expensive-looking sweater. But what struck her most was how he looked at them, not with disgust or annoyance, but with something that might have been concern. Can I help you? His voice was deep but gentle. Maya opened her mouth, but no words came out. How do you explain that you're homeless and scared and just need a place where wolves and bad people can't find you? Kai, always braver than his size suggested, stepped forward. Sir, we got kicked out of our foster home. We don't have anywhere to go, and it's really, really cold. His voice cracked on the last word. Can we please just sleep on your porch? We won't make any noise or cause trouble. We promise. The man's expression changed instantly. His eyes moved from Kai to Maya, taking in their thin clothes, their blue lips, the way they were both shivering uncontrollably. How long have you been out here? He asked, and Maya noticed he was already stepping aside, as if getting ready to let them in. Since this afternoon, Maya managed to whisper. Mrs. Henderson said we cost too much money. Something flickered across the man's face, an emotion Maya couldn't identify. Pain? Anger? Recognition? She threw you out? Today? In this weather? His voice carried a dangerous edge that wasn't directed at them. Maya nodded, suddenly afraid they had said too much. Rich people probably didn't want to hear about their problems. But instead of closing the door, the man looked down at their faces, really looked, and Maya saw something shift in his expression. His jaw tightened, and his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "What are your names?" he asked quietly. "I'm Maya, and this is my brother Kai. We're 10 years old," he repeated, as if the words tasted bitter. He glanced up at the sky, where snow was beginning to fall in fat, lazy flakes. "And she put you out in this?" For a moment, nobody spoke. Maya could hear her own heartbeat and the soft sound of snow hitting the ground. She wondered if this was where their story would end, two frozen kids found on a rich man's doorstep. Then the man stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come inside," he said simply. Now, Maya didn't move. She had learned not to trust adult kindness. It usually came with a price. "Sir, we just need to sleep on your porch. We don't want to be any trouble." The man crouched down so he was at their eye level. Up close, Maya could see that his expensive sweater couldn't hide the fact that he understood exactly what kind of trouble they were in. "My name is Darius," he said. "And you're not sleeping on any porch while it's snowing. Come inside, get warm, and we'll figure out what happens next." Kai looked at Maya with hope shining in his eyes for the first time in months. She squeezed his hand and made a decision that would change everything. Together, they stepped across the threshold into the warmest, most beautiful house they had ever seen, not knowing that the man who opened the door carried secrets that would soon change all their lives forever. Darius Cole closed the door behind the children and immediately regretted his decision. What was he thinking? He had spent the last 15 years carefully building walls around his private life, keeping everyone at a distance. His mansion in the hills wasn't just a home. It was a fortress, a place where no one could reach him, where no one could hurt him. And now he had two 10-year-olds dripping melted snow on his Italian marble floors. "This is a mistake," he muttered under his breath, watching as the children stood frozen in his foyer, their wide eyes taking in the crystal chandelier, the sweeping staircase, the original paintings that cost more than most people made in a year. Maya and Kai huddled together, still shivering despite the warmth. They looked so small in the vast space, like two lost birds who had accidentally flown into a palace. Darius could see their fingers, red and swollen from the cold, with what looked like early signs of frostbite on their fingertips. His business mind kicked in, the same calculating voice that had helped him build his empire from nothing. This could be a setup, it warned. People have tried crazier schemes to get close to your money. Rich man takes in homeless kids, perfect blackmail material. Perfect lawsuit waiting to happen. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" The words came out harsher than he intended. "How do I know someone didn't send you here? People know who I am, where I live." Maya's face crumpled, and Darius felt like he just kicked a puppy. But Kai surprised him by stepping forward, his small chin raised defiantly. "Send us here? Mister, nobody even knows we exist. We don't have parents who care about us. We don't have anyone who would send us anywhere." His voice shook with exhaustion and something else, a bone-deep sadness that no child should carry. "Mrs. Henderson threw us out because we eat too much food and use too much electricity. That's it. That's our whole story." The simple honesty in the boy's voice hit Darius like a physical blow. He recognized something in Kai's stance, the way he protected his sister even while defending himself, the adult weariness in a child's eyes, the resignation that comes from being unwanted too many times. "No," Darius thought fiercely. "Don't go there. Don't remember." But it was too late. The memories he had buried so deep were clawing their way to the surface. Another cold night 30 years ago. A different child standing on a different doorstep, begging for shelter. That child had been him. "Sir?" Maya's voice was barely a whisper. "If you want us to leave, we understand. We just thought maybe." She couldn't finish the sentence, but Darius could see it in her eyes. They had thought maybe someone might care enough to let them stay warm for one night. The same desperate hope he had carried from house to house, foster home to foster home, until he learned that hope was just another word for disappointment. His hands clenched into fists. This was exactly why he lived alone, why he kept everyone at arm's length. Children made him remember things he'd spent years forgetting. They made him feel things he'd learned to bury. But as he looked at their frostbitten fingers, something twisted in his chest. Maya was unconsciously rubbing Kai's hands, trying to warm them with her own frozen ones. The protective gesture was so familiar it made his throat tight. "She's just like you were," a voice whispered. "Taking care of everyone else, even when she's falling apart." "How long were you in that foster home?" he heard himself ask. 8 months, Maya answered. "It was supposed to be temporary, but temporary became permanent," Darius finished. He knew how that story went. Kai nodded. "Mrs. Henderson said we were too expensive. But Maya's really smart, she saw the checks that come for us. Mrs. Henderson was keeping both checks but only buying food for one kid." The familiar rage began building in Darius's chest. He had seen this before, lived this before. Foster parents who saw children as paychecks instead of people. The system that was supposed to protect kids but instead fed them to wolves in sheep's clothing. "Where were you before that home?" His voice was carefully controlled. 3 different places," Maya said quietly. "We keep getting moved because people say we're too much work. 2 kids instead of 1 inch. 2 kids instead of 1. Darius closed his eyes. He had been 2 kids instead of 1 too, in a way, too angry, too broken, too much trouble for anyone to handle. He opened his eyes and really looked at them again. Maya's protective stance, Kai's defiant bravery despite his fear. They weren't scammers or plants. They were just 2 kids who had been thrown away like garbage, the same way he had been thrown away. But accepting that truth meant accepting something else. That he couldn't just give them a hot meal and send them back into the system. Because the system had already failed them, just like it had failed him. The smart thing would be to call social services, let them handle it. Keep his distance, protect his carefully constructed life. Instead, he found himself saying, "When's the last time you ate?" "Yesterday morning," Kai admitted. "Yesterday," Darius repeated the words like they were poison. No wonder they looked so fragile. "Come on." He turned and walked toward the kitchen, not looking back to see if they followed. He couldn't trust himself to see the hope that would inevitably bloom in their faces. Hope was dangerous, for them and for him. Because despite every instinct screaming at him to stay uninvolved, Darius Cole was already falling into a trap he'd spent 30 years avoiding. He was starting to care. The kitchen was bigger than any room Maya and Kai had ever lived in. Gleaming countertops stretched across an island the size of a small car, and the refrigerator looked like something from a spaceship. But what caught their attention wasn't the luxury. It was the warmth radiating from the massive stone fireplace in the adjoining family room. Darius moved with quiet efficiency, pulling ingredients from cabinets and the refrigerator. Maya watched him carefully, still not quite believing this was real. Rich people didn't cook for foster kids. Rich people called the authorities and washed their hands of the problem. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the stools at the kitchen island. "Both of you." They climbed onto the stools, their legs too short to reach the floor. Darius pulled thick, soft blankets from a nearby closet and wrapped them around the children's shoulders. The moment the warmth enveloped her, Maya felt tears spring to her eyes. When was the last time someone had taken care of her instead of the other way around? "Hot chocolate first," Darius muttered, more to himself than to them. Then food. As he worked, moving pots and pans with surprising skill, Kai couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. "Mr. Darius, do you live in this big house all by yourself?" Darius paused in his stirring. "Yes." "Don't you get lonely?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Maya shot her brother a warning look. "You didn't ask rich people personal questions." But Darius just continued stirring the chocolate, his shoulders tensing slightly. "Lonely is safe," he said finally. People can't hurt you if they're not close enough. Maya understood that feeling more than she wanted to admit. How many times had she told herself it was better when foster parents ignored them? At least then they couldn't disappoint anyone. Darius placed steaming mugs in front of them, topped with real whipped cream and tiny marshmallows. Kai's eyes widened like he'd been given treasure, but Maya hesitated. "What do you want from us?" she asked quietly. "Nobody gives kids like us anything without wanting something back." Darius stopped what he was doing and looked at her. Really looked at her. Maya saw recognition flash across his face, like he was seeing himself in her suspicious, guarded expression. "Smart girl," he said. "You're right to ask. But I don't want anything from you." He turned back to the stove where something that smelled like heaven was sizzling. Sometimes people help because they wish someone had helped them when they needed it. Kai took a sip of his hot chocolate and made a sound of pure bliss. "Maya, you have to try this. It tastes like a hug." Despite everything, Maya smiled. Kai always found ways to describe feelings as tastes or colors or sounds. She took a sip and felt warmth spread through her chest for the first time in months. "Mrs. Henderson never let us have hot chocolate," Kai said, his voice matter-of-fact. "She said it was too expensive for kids like us. But we saw her drinking it while she watched TV." Darius's jaw tightened, but he didn't comment. Instead, he placed plates in front of them, grilled cheese sandwiches cut into perfect triangles, with tomato soup that was clearly homemade, not from a can. "Tell me about the other homes," he said casually, but Maya caught the underlying tension in his voice. Before Mrs. Henderson's, Maya and Kai exchanged glances. They had learned not to talk too much about their experiences. Social workers got tired of complaints, and new foster parents didn't want to hear about the failures of others. But something about the way Darius moved around the kitchen, the careful distance he maintained while still taking care of them, made Maya feel like maybe it was safe to tell the truth. "The first place, Mr. and Mrs. Garcia, they were nice at first," Maya began. "But they had 3 kids of their own, and we were just extra. Extra work, extra cost, extra noise. They never said it, but we could tell. The second home," Kai continued, his voice getting smaller. "Mr. Patterson was mean when he drank. Mrs. Patterson pretended not to see, but she knew. Maya always made sure I stayed in our room when he got angry." Darius's hand stilled on his coffee mug. "How angry?" "Angry enough that we learned to be invisible," Maya said quietly. The kitchen fell silent except for the soft crackling of the fireplace. Darius stared at his hands, and Maya saw something she didn't expect. His fingers were trembling slightly. "The third home lasted 2 days," Kai added, trying to lighten the mood. "Mrs. Chen said we ate too much at breakfast. 2 bowls of cereal was apparently excessive." 2 days, Darius repeated, his voice hollow. "They gave up on you in 2 days." Maya nodded. "That's when they sent us to Mrs. Henderson. She seemed excited about getting 2 kids. We thought," she shrugged, not wanting to admit how much hope she'd allowed herself to feel. "You thought you'd finally found someone who wanted you," Darius finished. The accuracy of his guess made Maya's chest tight. "Yeah. We thought maybe she'd let us stay. Maybe we could finally stop moving around." Darius was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice carried an edge of old pain. "I was in foster care too." The confession landed like a bomb in the warm kitchen. Maya and Kai stared at him, trying to process this information. "You were?" Kai whispered. 7 homes in 5 years. Darius's voice was carefully neutral, but Maya could hear the buried hurt. Each one convinced I was the problem. Too angry, too difficult, too damaged to love. "But look at you now," Maya said. "You have this amazing house, and you're successful, and I'm sitting alone in a mansion, afraid to let anyone get close." Darius interrupted. "Success isn't the same as healing, Maya." He looked at both of them, and Maya saw something shift in his expression. "But maybe," he said quietly, "it's time I remembered what it felt like to hope." While Maya and Kai slept soundly in the guest bedroom upstairs, the first real beds they'd had in months, Darius sat in his home office, surrounded by 3 computer monitors and a growing pile of documents. It was 3 a.m., but sleep was impossible. The children's stories had awakened something in him, something that demanded action. He started with Mrs. Henderson. What he found in the first hour of searching made his blood boil. Patricia Henderson, 58 years old, had been a licensed foster parent for 12 years. Her financial records, which his private investigator had obtained through perfectly legal channels, painted a disturbing picture. She was receiving monthly payments for 6 different children, but according to school enrollment records, only 2 children were currently living in her home. Where were the other 4? Darius picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Marcus, it's Darius Cole. I need a favor. Marcus Rodriguez had been his first friend after aging out of the foster system, and now ran a private investigation firm specializing in child welfare cases. If anyone could help him navigate this maze of corruption, it was Marcus. Darius? Man, it's been forever. What's going on? I need you to dig into the foster care system. Specifically, a woman named Patricia Henderson, but I think this goes deeper. Darius stared at the financial documents spread across his desk. Much deeper. By dawn, Marcus had sent over files that made Darius feel sick. Mrs. Henderson wasn't an isolated case, she was part of a network. At least 15 foster parents in the county were receiving payments for children who were either missing from their homes or being severely neglected. The pattern was always the same: take in multiple children, collect the government payments, provide minimal care, then claim the children had behavioral problems or were too expensive. When questions arose, the children would be shuffled to new homes, but the payments would often continue for months during the transfer process. Darius discovered something even worse. 3 children who had been in Mrs. Henderson's care had simply vanished from the system 18 months ago. The paperwork claimed they had been transferred to relatives, but there was no record of any relatives, no forwarding addresses, nothing. His hands shook as he read the names: Tommy Chin, age 8. Aaliyah Brooks, age 9. David Restrepo, age 7. 3 children. Gone. The office door creaked open, and Maya peered in, her hair messy from sleep. Mr. Darius? Are you okay? I heard you talking. Darius quickly closed the files on his screen. Just some work stuff. Why are you up so early? Maya stepped into the room, and Darius noticed she was still wearing the same clothes from yesterday. I'm used to getting up early. Mrs. Henderson made us do chores before school. She paused, studying his face. You look upset. There was no point lying to her. Maya was too smart, had seen too much to be fooled by adult pleasantries. I've been looking into Mrs. Henderson, he admitted, and some other foster homes. Maya's expression grew serious. What did you find? Darius hesitated. How much could he tell a 10-year-old? But then he remembered being 10 years old himself, how much he had hated when adults treated him like he couldn't handle the truth. I found that she's been stealing money meant for children. Not just you and Kai, but other kids too. Maya nodded grimly, like this confirmed what she had already suspected. We weren't the first kids she threw out, were we? No, Darius said quietly. You weren't. What happened to the others? That was the question that had been eating at him all night. I don't know yet. But I'm going to find out. Maya walked closer to his desk, and Darius saw something in her expression that made his chest tight. She looked older than her 10 years, carrying a weight that no child should bear. There were other kids there when we first arrived, she said quietly. A little boy named Tommy and a girl named Aaliyah. Mrs. Henderson said they got adopted, but Darius's blood turned to ice. But what? But their clothes were still in the closet. And Tommy left his teddy bear. He would never have left without Mr. Buttons. Maya's voice was barely a whisper. I asked Mrs. Henderson about it, and she got really angry. She said I was asking too many questions. The pieces clicked together in Darius's mind with horrible clarity. The missing children from his files. The ones who had supposedly gone to relatives. Maya, he said carefully, I need you to tell me everything you remember about those children. Everything Mrs. Henderson said about where they went. For the next hour, Maya shared details that painted an increasingly dark picture. Children who disappeared in the middle of the night. Strange men who came to the house for meetings with Mrs. Henderson. Phone calls where she discussed moving merchandise. Merchandise. Not children. Merchandise. Darius felt rage building in his chest, the same fury that had gotten him in trouble as a teenager. But this time, he wasn't a powerless kid. This time, he had resources, connections, and enough money to shake the entire system if necessary. Mr. Darius? Maya's voice broke through his thoughts. Are you going to help them? The other kids? Darius looked at this brave little girl who had survived things that would break most adults, and made a decision that would change everything. Maya, I'm going to do more than help them. I'm going to tear this whole system apart and rebuild it. He turned back to his computers, already planning his next moves. No more children are going to disappear. No more kids are going to be thrown away like garbage. What about Kai and me? Darius met her eyes. You and Kai are never going anywhere you don't want to go again. I promise. As Maya smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her, Darius was already making mental lists. Lawyers to call. Journalists to contact. Politicians to pressure. Mrs. Henderson had no idea what was coming for her. But she was about to find out. 3 days later, Darius stood on the cracked steps of Mrs. Henderson's house, flanked by 2 lawyers, a private investigator, and a reporter from the city's largest newspaper. But he wasn't here for a polite conversation. He was here for war. Maya and Kai waited in his car with his security detail, close enough to feel safe but far enough to avoid witnessing what was about to happen. Both children had insisted on coming, needing to see this through to the end. Mrs. Henderson opened the door with her usual scowl, but her expression changed instantly when she saw the group assembled on her porch. What is this? She demanded, trying to close the door. Darius placed his hand against it, stopping her. Patricia Henderson, my name is Darius Cole. I believe you know Maya and Kai Williams? Her face went pale. Those ungrateful brats? They ran away. I reported it to social services. You reported nothing, Darius said coldly. Because reporting would create a paper trail, and paper trails are dangerous when you're committing fraud. I don't know what you're talking about. But her voice shook, and Darius could see sweat beading on her forehead despite the cold December air. I'm talking about 12 years of stealing money meant for vulnerable children. I'm talking about collecting payments for 6 kids while only housing 2. I'm talking about 3 missing children who supposedly went to relatives that don't exist. The reporter, Elena Vasquez, stepped forward with her recording device. Mrs. Henderson, can you tell us what happened to Tommy Chin, Aaliyah Brooks, and David Restrepo? Mrs. Henderson's eyes darted between them like a trapped animal. Hi, they were adopted. It's not my fault if the paperwork got mixed up. Mixed up, Darius repeated. Is that what you call falsifying adoption records? Is that what you call selling children? The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Mrs. Henderson's face crumpled, and for a moment, Darius saw not a monster but a frightened woman who had been caught. You don't understand, she whispered. I needed the money. My husband left me with nothing. The state payments weren't enough. When Mr. Carver offered me extra for the right kind of kids. Mr. Carver? Darius's lawyer, Jennifer Park, stepped forward immediately. Who is Mr. Carver? Mrs. Henderson clamped her mouth shut, realizing she had said too much. But Darius already had that answer. His investigation had led him to Robert Carver, a man who ran what appeared to be a legitimate adoption agency but was actually trafficking children to wealthy buyers who preferred to avoid traditional adoption processes. Children who asked too many questions, like Maya. Children who were too trusting, like Tommy. Children who had no one to miss them. Here's what's going to happen, Darius said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had built an empire from nothing. You're going to tell us everything. Where those children are. Who else is involved? Every detail of this operation. And if I don't? Darius smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then my lawyers will ensure you spend the rest of your life in prison. And I'll make sure every news outlet in the country knows your name. You'll be the face of everything wrong with foster care. Mrs. Henderson's defiance crumbled. You can't do this to me. I'm just one person. The whole system is broken. You think getting rid of me will change anything? You're right, Darius said. The whole system is broken. But I'm not just getting rid of you. I'm getting rid of all of you. He pulled out his phone and made a call that Mrs. Henderson could hear clearly. Senator Morrison? It's Darius Cole. I'm ready to discuss that foster care reform bill you mentioned. And I'm prepared to fund a complete overhaul of the state's child welfare system. Yes, whatever it takes. As he spoke, 3 police cars pulled up to the house. Detective Sarah Kim, who had been coordinating with Darius's team, approached with a warrant. Patricia Henderson, you're under arrest for child endangerment, fraud, and conspiracy to commit human trafficking. Mrs. Henderson collapsed onto her porch as the handcuffs clicked into place. Please, she sobbed. I'll tell you everything. Just please don't let them hurt me. The only person who's going to be hurt, Darius said, watching as she was led to the police car, is anyone else who thinks children are merchandise to be bought and sold. Elena Vasquez was already on her phone with her editor. We need to hold the front page. This story is going to blow up the entire state foster care system. But even as Mrs. Henderson was driven away, Darius knew this was just the beginning. His investigation had uncovered a network of corrupt foster parents, social workers, and administrators that stretched across 3 counties. Robert Carver was still out there, along with at least a dozen other people involved in the trafficking ring. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Found Carver's location. Warehouse outside the city. Police are moving in now. Darius closed his eyes and felt something he hadn't experienced in 30 years. The satisfaction of fighting back against a system that had tried to destroy him. When he opened his eyes, he saw Maya and Kai watching from the car window. Maya gave him a small thumbs up, and Kai was grinning like they had just won the lottery. They had no idea that their nightmare was finally over. But more importantly, they had no idea that their courage to knock on a stranger's door had just saved dozens of other children from the same fate. The war was far from over, but this battle belonged to them. 6 months later, Maya stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of what was now officially her home, watching Kai play soccer in the enormous backyard with 2 other children, Tommy Chin and Aaliyah Brooks. They had been found in a warehouse 3 states away, traumatized but alive. David Restrepo was still recovering in the hospital, but doctors said he would make a full recovery. The adoption papers had been finalized last week. Maya Williams Cole and Kai Williams Cole. She still couldn't quite believe it was real. Maya! Darius called from the kitchen. Dinner's ready! She smiled at the sound. 6 months ago, the idea of a billionaire calling them to dinner would have seemed impossible. Now it was just Tuesday. As she walked toward the kitchen, Maya passed the wall that had become known as the Victory Wall. Newspaper headlines covered nearly every inch. Foster care trafficking ring exposed. Billionaire's crusade saves dozens of children. State announces complete overhaul of child welfare system. But her favorite wasn't a headline at all. It was a photo from last month's legislative hearing, showing Darius testifying before Congress about foster care reform. In the front row behind him sat Maya, Kai, Tommy, Aaliyah, and 15 other children who had been rescued from various trafficking operations across the country. They had become his army of truth-tellers, living proof that the system needed to change. The dining room buzzed with conversation as the extended family gathered around the massive table. In addition to Maya, Kai, Tommy, and Aaliyah, there were 3 social workers, 2 lawyers, and Marcus Rodriguez, who had become a permanent fixture in their lives. The Cole Foundation's first children's home opens next week, Jennifer Park announced, raising her glass of sparkling cider. Complete with trauma counselors, educational support, and most importantly, families who are thoroughly vetted and trained. 43 homes across 7 states by the end of next year. Darius added. All with 24/7 monitoring and zero tolerance for abuse. Maya listened to the adults discuss budget allocations and policy changes, but her attention was drawn to Kai, who was explaining to Tommy why he didn't have to hide food in his room anymore. Mr. Darius has like 17 refrigerators, Kai said seriously. And he told us we can eat whenever we want. Watch this. He got up and grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl, taking a big bite. See? No one gets mad. Tommy looked amazed, like Kai had just performed magic. Maya, Darius said quietly, moving to sit beside her. How are you feeling about the interview tomorrow? Tomorrow, Maya would be speaking on national television about her experiences in foster care. At first, the idea had terrified her. But then she realized that somewhere out there, another child might be suffering in silence, thinking no one would believe them or help them. I'm ready, she said. Someone needs to tell people what really happens to kids like us. Kids like you are the reason I get up every morning, Darius replied. You turned my life upside down, you know that? Maya grinned. Good upside down or bad upside down? The best kind of upside down. He glanced around the table at their unconventional family. 6 months ago, I was hiding in this house, afraid to let anyone get close. Now look at this place. The house had been transformed. Where once there had been sterile perfection, now there were children's drawings on the refrigerator, toys scattered across the living room, and the constant sound of laughter echoing through the halls. Do you ever miss it? Maya asked. Being alone? Darius considered the question seriously. I thought I would. But it turns out, lonely isn't as safe as I thought it was. It's just empty. And this isn't empty, Maya observed. No, he agreed, watching Kai demonstrate his soccer skills to an impressed audience. This is the opposite of empty. After dinner, as they did every evening, the family gathered in the living room for what Darius called circle time. It was a chance for everyone to share something good from their day and something they were worried about. When it was Maya's turn, she looked around at the faces that had become her whole world. Something good. Tommy laughed at Kai's joke today. A real laugh, not a scared 1-inch. Tommy beamed, and Maya felt her heart swell. Something I'm worried about, that there are still kids out there who think no one cares about them. That's why we're fighting, Darius said simply. So every child knows that someone is looking for them, someone is fighting for them. Later that night, after the younger children were asleep, Maya found Darius in his office, working late as usual. But now his work had a different purpose. Instead of building wealth, he was building safety nets for children who had fallen through the cracks. Mr. Darius? Maya said softly. Thank you. For everything. He looked up from his computer, and Maya saw something in his expression that made her feel warm all the way through. Maya, you and Kai didn't just knock on my door that night. You knocked down every wall I'd built around my heart. He smiled. Thank you for teaching me that love isn't something to hide from. It's something to fight for. As Maya headed to bed, she passed the window where she'd stood that morning. But now, instead of looking out at what she might lose, she was looking forward to what tomorrow might bring. Somewhere out there, another child might be cold and scared and desperate. But now they had an army of people fighting for them. And it all started with 2 kids brave enough to knock on a stranger's door.